Welcome to Copper Cat Books and our ongoing conversation series with local authors. And today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Dr. Wilson Reed. Welcome. He's a former humanities professor. He's recently moved to Las Vegas, and now he considers himself a full-time writer. And today he's going to tell us about your book, Junebug. So welcome.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
So tell me about Junebug. What's the plot? Kind of get me hooked in, so I want to know more about Junebug.
What we want to share I want to share today is that Junebug is a nickname. He grew up in Redwood, Mississippi, rural Redwood, Mississippi, outside of Vicksburg, Mississippi, which is a famous place. So all of us little kiddos had nicknames. And of course, my name is Wilson Edward Reed, but kids don't call each other by formal names. They just call each other Aprilish or Johnny John or,
Right.
Pighead or anything bizarre they want to, affectionately call each other. And it's a loving thing. But, I had Coot, Robert, who's kind of roguish kind of guy. Yogi was one of my friends, and there was a guy named Mud. So this is a way of carrying on relationships. And what I've been told, there are lots of Junebugs out there. Yes, and quite a few people that I run into. I had 5 friends named Junebug, and I was warned not to use Junebug as my title. And
Oh, you were?
yeah, I'm like, no, I'm doing Junebug because there's some other stuff out there, but it's not related to what I'm doing. So yeah.
Would you consider the story then a little bit semi-autobiography about your growing up years?
Yes, it is. It's a fictionalized book about my first 13 years of my life. I mean, basically 12 years of high school, and 1 year I went to a community college. So basically the book explores Junebug navigating being a little kiddo, little black boy in a segregated society, and there's lots of love inside the house and then the little small African American community, but there were 22 laws that govern race relations in Mississippi when Junebug was growing up there.
Wow.
So that was the law of the land or the law of the state of Mississippi. So if you violated those laws, there were fines, there were all kinds of things that would happen to people, formally and informally. But Junebug grew up with quite a bit of fear as a little kid because he, again, had that love, the family, the church, and the school, and loving parents. But outside, he could be called boy, the N-word. And the most important thing about Jim Crow and the segregation Junebug experienced is that the schools were segregated, the churches were segregated, the swimming pools were segregated. Every aspect of life, the funeral homes, the graveyards. So Junebug grew up thinking his whole life would be like what he was experiencing. He didn't have no framework for understanding anything, and we didn't have color televisions, and at this time we didn't have black and white. But the most important thing to know about Junebug, he grew up in a house with no running water and a outhouse out back. So he grew up without a whole bunch of amenities. So there were some people in the community from his Russia group and that had some things, but Junebug, because his dad had came back from the war with some PTSD, and they didn't call it that then. They would just say, that guy's acting crazy. So my dad came back. He had, you've seen those before and after pictures. He was a wonderful looking guy, the before picture. But he came back, rather broken kind of guy. And the story is just a wonderful story to tell about universal issues, love, hate, family, kinfolks on both sides. There's the kinfolks on the Reed side, and there's the kinfolks on the Johnson side. So there was a lot of love in those families, and they were very small. Everybody knew everybody, and Junebug sort of thought, this is the way the world is.
Yeah.
It's, in that environment. But when he went off to the first chapter is Junebug waiting on the colored bus. And he's got grasshoppers in his belly, and he's, trying to figure things out. And he's like, why isn't my bus here?
Right.
And the white kids are passing by in their bus, and it's really nice and shiny, and Junebug's rickety little bus finally arrives, and he knows the bus driver from Sunday school, and he knows Robert and Wardell, his best buddies and friends. So they're getting ready for their first year.
Yeah.
In Junebug case, first day of school in his hand-me-down clothes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or clothes that were from, what we call it, layaway.
Right.
And so people would put stuff on with layaway, but Junebug has a nice, good-looking little shirt on there that's made from color, but the original book is black and white. So he's a humanitarian. He wants good for the world, and he's a curious little guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Who would you say the audience that you wrote the book for is?
The audience for the book is young people, I would say 5 to 8th grade, 5 to 9th grade.
Yeah, and I understand before we hopped on camera, you've spent a lot of time volunteering in schools and doing some work with kids.
That's right. That's right.
Did that play into the process of writing the book and your message for the book, do you think?
That did.
Inspiration?
That and COVID came around, and I ran out of excuses. I had these excuses of why I wasn't getting this work done, but I I had notes for years of stuff and stories. So the best part of the Junebug story is I could do this orally, in presentations and really get people going. And students would say to me, I can feel what you're talking about,
Oh, good.
Dr. Reed. And
Yeah.
one student would say to me often, I think you're an old school rapper. That's what you are. You're an old school rapper. So I kept trying to make it real with students and share what it was like. And
Right.
actually went off. A friend of mine invited me to speak at St. John and St. Benedict University in Minnesota. And I wanted to talk about a certain subject matter I'd been researching about, African Americans unarmed getting shot by the police or something like that. And there'd been a shooting in Minneapolis or something like that. And the students kept wanting to talk about what it was like those early years. They wanted to know, what was that like? And I kept saying, well, geez, if I cover some of this stuff, I'm probably going to end up start crying and stuff. Yeah. And that's not a cool thing for a guy getting paid $2,000 for 2 hours and a free flight over from Seattle. So I figured out a way to weave through it and talked about my mom and my dad and growing up with not a high level of self-esteem and, just wanted to feel better about myself, but that we were poor, and at one point we were on welfare. We called it relief or something like that back in the day. But, it was Mama having to go out to this white lady's place and clean the house and take care of their kids. And I would joke, even as a little kid, is if Mom is taking care of that guy's family, who's taking care of us? And my dad, because of his alcohol beverage problems, never landed veterans benefits. I don't know if he didn't know about it or he was, forbidden from applying for it, but
Right.
he was turned into a weekend drinker. He wasn't a drinker too much during the week, but he never was able to gain a full-time job, like working at the post office or a permanent job, working for a construction company or any of that stuff. He just would take jobs from time to time and do stuff. But weekend, it was his time to go to the juke joint and hang around, men and other people that were partying and stuff like that. But he would leave our family or drop us off at the other family across the river and would just take off and clean up and dress off and stuff like that. And my most hurtful experience of my dad growing up was him coming back in a police car with a bandage on the side of his face. And the word is that he had gotten into it with some guy. In the juke joints, you didn't have to do that much to get in trouble.
Right,
Look at somebody's woman or man the wrong way, and people would say, "What? Don't even think about it." And people didn't have guns then; they used razors,
Right.
or brass knuckles,
Right.
and that kind of stuff. But Junebug grew up pretty fast, early on, learning some things about stuff that most kids didn't have to think about.
So the writing process for you, it kind of sounds like you incorporated that idea of like verbally telling the stories and seeing how they landed with your audience, which are children and youth, and then creating the book. Or did you kind of outline it? Tell us a little bit about that writing process.
I had about 200 pages. I met someone that was a person that had helped authors, and her name is Julia. She looked at what I had and turned it into 2 pages, which I had 200, and she was like, "Oh, you have maybe 35 or 40 pages. So what we're going to do is turn these into vignettes. So each little story leads to another story." So this starts out in the early 50s when Jim Crow was live and well. So Junebug is a kid that's going off to school. Second story is Robert and Wardell and Junebug going off hunting. He's about 10 then, and they're going supposedly coon hunting. And these guys play a joke on Junebug, and they out and they complain about it. It's too dark. We didn't have nice lights then. We had something called a carbine light, and we were just out there. And at some point they said, "Well, guess what? There's a coon up there in that tree, and we want you to shoot him. You're a rookie. You shoot that coon." And I shot the coon. And I thought it was a coon, but the guys had played a joke on. It was a possum. So we put it in a bag or wrapped it up and put it in something, and I went home to my folks, and Daddy's Wilson Reed Sr. and Mama Willie B. And Daddy's like, "Boy, those boys done played a fool out of you." Mm-hmm. And I said, "They told me it was a coon. They said it was a French coon, actually."
French coon.
And Dad said, "Boy, you've been played. You've been played." And Mama says, "Get it out of here. Stinks." So this is Junebug coming of age, hanging with his friends.
Yeah.
But the way friendship worked growing up was that you didn't hold a grudge with your friends. You just, the next day, you just like, hey, hit them up, boom. But the older men just they laughed at me for days. "You let that boy," and those boys turn you into a clown. And I said, "Well, we all cool." And then you go on to the next day and there's school. But Junebug is noticing things at school. We have big words to explain it now, inequalities, but there's the white school that's beautiful and it's brick, and there's concrete outside, and Junebug School, that was King's Elementary. Junebug School was not at King's, but he was bused to an all-black school called King's. But the first school, Redwood, he and his family folks and friends were not allowed to go to that school. So he was bused to King's Elementary, which was 30 minutes away. And he had to learn to adjust to this bifurcated world and the inequality of it. You know, we were all had an American flag out in front of our school.
Right.
But our school was different. But the teachers loved us. Even in this segregated environment, it was predominantly African American and black teachers.
Right.
I did not have a white teacher until I was in college. After I moved to Seattle, then I was 19 or 20 years old.
Right.
So the teachers loved us, and they were hard on us, even though we were using hand-me-down books. You know, Junebug, I talked about hand-me-down clothing, but there was hand-me-down books that were sent over from the other side of town for us at the time. And Junebug is called colored on his birth certificate. The schools were called Schools for Colored Kids. So we experienced it head on. We didn't know anything else existed. We didn't go to the other side of town to find out about that. But again, the teachers loved us. It was, they were tough on us because they wanted us to learn. And they wanted us to understand this other world, but they didn't go in depth into it. And I can recall taking Shakespeare classes, and all of us were like, what's Shakespeare got to do with what we're experiencing here?
Right.
You see, but it was colorism, you know, that he experienced, racism that he experienced, social class. But on the weekends, Dad was, you know, Dad, but during the week, I was his little his little boy, going pick up stuff. Go in there, and he would working under the car, and he'd say, go pick up me a Crescent Ranch or whatever. So he was a lovely guy on that level early in the week. But he taught me that alcohol, beverage, and drinking was probably not a good thing for my future. He didn't say, don't do this. But Dad coming back, puking or in the police car, that kind of stuff, had an impact on me growing up as a kid.
Right. So when people read the book, besides a fun collection or a moving collection of, you know, vignettes of growing up and the struggles with that, what is one takeaway that you want your reader to come away with, something you want them to walk away with?
I think one thing is to feel some of what Junebug experienced. And I think one of the things that's sort of missing in our highly technological society is we don't read enough. And my joke about reading is I had books even when I didn't have friends. And I think one of the things is for young people to be able to sit with a book and go to a place they've never been. So for many young people, they can grow up and come into a place like this and learn something about New York, New Mexico, learn something about Mississippi that they didn't know. And when I was teaching at Seattle University, I found that 400 or 500 of our students would go all around the world, but they never had experienced the 13 states right here in America, you know, the Southern Confederate States. Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on your book, Junebug Wilson.
Yeah.
Tell everyone in the audience when you will be at Copper Cat Books for your book signing.
Okay, again, I'm Wilson Edward Reed Jr., and short, fun name, Junebug. I will be here at Copper Cats on October 18th. I don't know the exact time, but
12 to 3.
12 to 3. We're looking forward to it, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Wilson.